it's all about time on legs. Like, you just have to be out there working hard every day if you ever want to hope to achieve anything in the sport. So if you have no choice in the matter, that like the race is happening no matter what, you might as well make the race as easy as possible. And part of that is being prepared to handle heat in the sauna. The aerobic foundation, once you build it up, it does a much better job of like sticking around, because it basically never goes away once you build it up. Even just a little bit off that day, it will show up in the pool. There's no doubt about it. When you're just like sitting, relaxed, breathing, there's nothing inhibiting your breathing at all. But when you're tense on a bike, holding that position, you know, your back muscles are engaged, you know, your core is engaged in all these things. You're breathing in a much more like restricted environment. Like your diaphragm and all these things aren't able to like expand.
All right, Jameson, we're on the podcast. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to have you on. First of all, congratulations on your great results at the recent St. George Ironman. Tell us a little bit about well, before we dive into the race and everything that came before and what's going to come after, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Well, my name's Jameson Plewes. Started triathlon 6 years ago, but I started with my team that I'm on right now, Balance Point Racing, 3 years ago. That's coached by Luke Way, high performance, like elite triathlon team. I just recently finished up my medical molecular biochemistry degree.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that as well as my training. Born in Saskatchewan, lived in Manitoba for 5 years, and now I currently live in Kelowna. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Okay, well, it's a good place to start. Why triathlon? What drew you to the sport?
Just being like, I did swimming and running when I was younger, and I did a lot of biking as well. And I knew I wanted to be like I knew I wanted to be a professional athlete, or at least be like a really like elite athlete. Like I really looked up to those guys, but in those three sports individually, I just like wasn't good enough no matter how much work I was doing. Like, I'd go to a track meet, right? I'd be running every day and then get beat by guys that only ran at the track meets. And it's like, what the heck? But finally, when I put all that stuff together, I did my first like sprint distance race, and I was 16. And, you know, I did it in an hour and like 25 minutes, which that's not good really at all for even like a 16-year-old. But I just kind of knew that I really liked triathlon at that point, and I felt that it was something I could be good at. So I just stuck with it. And I guess like endurance sports matched my personality a bit better too. Like, I just like to be a grinder, I guess, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's what triathlon is, because triathlon it's all about time on legs. Like, you just have to be out there working hard every day if you ever want to hope to achieve anything in the sport. So
is there
just worked out.
Is there anything in your earlier years that led you to figure that out about yourself? I mean, talk about personality. It's fairly rare for, I would say, from my perspective, at least, for a 16-year-old to be self-aware enough to say, this is my personality, and this activity probably matches that. Is that something that came early?
Well, I had glimpses of it, like even in my swimming. I always enjoyed the longer races more. Like, I was one of like, at Manitoba swim meets, I'd be like one of the three guys that signed up for the 1500. You know, there'd be one heat, and it would be like there'd be a 10-year-old all the way up to like an 18-year-old. Like, that was it. It'd be like just a handful of people. So I'd be like one of those guys. Same thing. I went to a summer camp. It's called Camp Chicopee in Ontario. They train swimmers. It's like an open water swimming camp. They've had lots of guys there. They used to have the American national team go there all the time back in like the 70s and 80s and 90s. Even Mark Spitz went there. But like, there, like I learned how to swim like long distance open water races as well. And even though I wasn't good at it compared to the guys there, I actually just like liked it for some reason. Like swimming an open water 5K. I mean, it's not most swimmers kind of like dread those events, whereas I kind of found that I liked it. And then I don't know, same thing just with running and cycling, like same story. I just kind of liked to do it for a long time.
Mhm. For someone like me who can't swim to save my life, I guess I could save my life, but that's really about it. How would you describe the main differences between open water swimming and swimming in a pool?
Um open water is has some challenges because it's not how good you are isn't purely um based on how fast you are. A lot to do with it is like pacing and sighting and
When you say sighting, it's just catching an eye on maybe a reference point that you can have while swimming.
yeah, like some races will have, well, like in triathlons they have buoys, but some open water races it's like there's nothing to see. You just have to like follow the canoe that's 100 meters ahead of you or whatever. So it's like things like that. You have to be able to sight, stay patient, stay calm because the swims are so long. Like you're doing hour or 2 hour long swims, stuff like that. You got to be comfortable with cold water, deep water, can't see anything. I mean, if you talk to swimmers that do the really ultra long stuff, like I met the girl that swam across uh, Lake Ontario, one of the really long lakes in in the Great Lakes there.
Mhm.
And like they had like little eels or something that would come up and like attach onto the swimsuit that they have to like pull off while they're swimming. I don't know what they were. It was weird though. Like lots of just like little problems like that you have to be used to in open water. Like even ocean swimmers, you got to be dealing with jellyfish, things like that. Whereas like in the pool, it's just all about putting your head down, getting to the wall and back over and over. You know,
You talked about the
it's
cold
all it is
water.
really.
You talked about the cold water. Is that something that you prep for? Do you do, colder exposures to get ready for when you go into the lakes or for your swims?
Um, I mean, I try. I can barely handle cold water. Like all the guys on my team will tell you that we do a lot of lake swimming like early in the year until like later in the year, and just like I for whatever reason, no matter how much I do it, I can still bear, like I do it, but I just like I find it so uncomfortable. But I think that's kind of like what it takes is you just have to, yeah, continuously like expose yourself to cold water to really have any hope of ever like performing in it. Because if it's just a one-off race that you show up to and the water is 15 Celsius, like that's going to be a shock to the system because it is really hard to function in that.
Has it ever happened to you to be actually impacted negatively by the temperature of the water on a triathlon, on a competition?
Um, Trying to think. Certainly, it started me on a pretty negative trend in a race before. Like I don't know if I've ever like swam bad specifically because of cold water, but I've certainly had like somewhat poor races because I was got so cold at the beginning and then just never warmed up.
Mhm.
Like I remember one year like in Calgary 70.3. It was absolutely like pouring rain and like freeze. It was like 9 degrees Celsius on the bike and the lake was cold. So like I finished the swim and usually you can at least like warm up on the bike a little bit, but I got on the bike and it just got even worse. Like I couldn't even start really racing until the run because I was just like convulsing. But
Still got through
the
it.
way it is. Yeah.
Uh, Going back to, I guess, the evolution of your training career so far. So you started on the shorter distance. Is that pretty common in triathlon? to start with a sprint or a shorter distance, and then to go towards the longer events?
Yeah, so the most normal progression would be um, like just so somebody starts triathlon. Um, Generally, people who get into the more elite racing, they would start with like junior elite. So it's just like the sprint distance draft legal, or there's a youth elite as well. It's a little bit shorter, like super sprint stuff like that. And then they go
Mhm.
through that until you age out at 19. And then so you have the choice. You either keep in with the elite racing. So like some guys will go into like the NCAA stuff in the States, because the
Mhm.
States through their colleges or universities or whatever you call them, they, they have like a really good program for that, like triathlon racing. I wish we had something like that in Canada, but we don't, but they do. And then from there, you'd either you continue into like your WTS career, or you'd make the switch into like Ironman. Or some guys like me, probably like the other half of guys and girls, it's just like we done triathlons in our youth, maybe done like a little bit of the elite racing, but just preferred to like stick with the half Ironmans, or like, move up just Olympic distance, take on a couple half Ironmans, and then eventually an Ironman.
Mhm.
But generally in the pro field, most of those guys came from like professional elite racing, like WTS and all that stuff.
It's interesting that you mentioned the culture differences between Canada and the US. I was lucky to have Alex Hutchinson on the podcast, who wrote the book Endure. For those who are interested in endurance training, it's a fantastic read, and he had both experiences. He actually had US, Canada, and then I think Canada first, then US, and I believe he went to the UK afterwards. So he kind of had all those different perspectives, and he said that, as you said, there's a lot more support in the US, but at the same time in Canada, you have to kind of own your sport. You have to be part of the team. You have to put in the work when it comes to traveling, when it comes to getting organized. All those things are not taken care of for you, and it kind of gives you a different maybe ownership of the sport or of your own performance. Is that something that you can relate to?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I mean, I'd say a higher proportion of the Canadian athletes that do progress through the sport and take it seriously actually reach the elite level, just because you have to be like so dedicated to really make it anywhere. 'Cause I mean, like, I do think the Americans have the better program, where they do support their athletes more. Like if you get on their elite teams, like, I mean, you're getting credit cards basically, and they just say like, take care of your costs, whatever you need.
Mhm.
Whereas like that doesn't exist really to that extent in Canada, unless you make it onto like the Olympic development team. Um, but yeah, I would say that's true. Like it's true. Like you do. I would say it's because it's a harder grind. I'd say a higher proportion of those athletes do become pro out of Canada. So
So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, about your, quote unquote work-life balance, or studies and training
yeah,
life balance. What does a typical week look like for you, in terms of the training and then all the other activities that you have to place around that, or vice versa? I don't know how you organize your training.
yeah. So basically, it's usually an early morning swim. That's like a pretty standard day, and then sometimes sneak in like a frequency run shortly after that swim. So probably Luke would have told you yesterday, kind of like the whole idea, like you just zone two volume. So that's a big part of it for
Mhm.
my training, is just trying to get in like 4, 5, 6, 30 to 45 minute runs per week. Just little jogs, nothing crazy, just zone two. And then after that, I'd be going to class, be in school for a couple hours. I generally I prefer to take care of all my school during the day when I'm still sharp, but sometimes it's not possible because I still have to get the evening workout in. Um, During the week, like Monday, Wednesdays, that'll be like a bike ride, like usually like a 2.5 hour ride. After that would be another like brick run after that. Tuesdays, it'll be the same thing. It'd be like swim, gym, and then that's like the longer tempo run day or just a long zone 2 run, just depending
Mhm.
what the goal of the week is. Sometimes like a bit of added bike volume in there. Same thing, like get the school in kind of midday. Um, Friday or Thursday is usually a rest day, so that would be like a easy swim, maybe like easy jog. Usually a massage that day as well. That's like the day I didn't have school that day this semester as well, actually. So it was nice that day I could take just to like catch up on everything. But well, because I had to, because like Friday was like one of the gnarliest days of the week because it'd be like, first thing in the morning, 6 a.m., get to the pool, and then immediately like go to the track and like to build up for this Ironman. Luke was giving me workouts. Like I was doing 12 times a mile on the track. So they'd end up being like 24-kilometer track runs, all at like threshold pace, basically. And then, and I'd still have class that day afterwards. I usually like not doing very well in class by that point. But yeah, and then like weekends, Saturday is always a long ride day. 4 hours minimum for me. I really anything less than 4 hours is like not like you have to be kind of doing at least 4 hours to be training for Ironman. If I'm doing less, it'll be like a taper week or some sort of special workout. And then obviously like a swim and a run in there as well. Sunday, long run day, same thing. Swim if I can fit it in. I usually work that day, so sometimes the swim isn't possible. Um, Also sprinkled in there would be like 2 to 3 hours of sauna,
Mhm.
time in the sauna. It'd be a bit of breathway training for me. Um, like 2 hours of gym work. Um,
What do you feel
what
the
else?
sauna adds to your overall training?
It's mostly just like it's heat training. Like in this sport, you really have to be um, like capable of managing heat. So in the sauna, what we do is we swim, and then so right after the swim, like you don't waste any time while your core temperature is still up after the workout, and then you just get right into the sauna. And then the goal is always to stay in there for at least 30 minutes. Um, Sometimes to like make it even harder, do like a bit of core work or something in there. I usually for me just sitting on the top bench is hot enough, but some of the other guys like they do a bit of core work. Um, yeah, and then get in there, and then so basically what we're doing, we're just exposing our body to like really really high temperatures, and forcing it to manage. Well, also the mental aspect, like you're never going to get hotter than you feel in a sauna in a race. Like you're never going to get that hot in a race no matter what. Like you're not going to be racing in like 50 Celsius. um well, I mean maybe some people do, but
Let's
not
play some
definitely
extreme
not. Yeah,
races out there.
yeah. But so yeah, just that exposure to heat. And I mean like 30 minutes is more than enough to get some adaptation if you do it like repeatedly throughout the week. um
Is that something that you keep year round, or do you do it at specific times preparing for an event?
yeah, we try to do it year round because if you lose that heat tolerance, getting it back is just like it's hard.
It's easier
It's
to
not
keep it than
something.
to gain it back.
Yeah, it's you do not want to like when you've already cooked yourself 5 minutes into getting into the sauna and you still got another 25 minutes, not a nice feeling. So,
Would you
and I
say
mean,
that? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there's people out there that are gonna like think that like that's easy, but it's totally different after you've just done a hard workout in the pool and then
Hmm.
immediately go in there. It's so
Would you say that the sauna, well, using the sauna for that heat adaptation, is that something that's fairly common in those long distance events, or do you know a lot of athletes around you that do the same outside of your team?
uh it's common in the athletes that are at the top of their game.
Okay.
So I I see it a lot in the athletes that have like really um at the highest level, but it doesn't I don't see it a ton in like age group athletes really, other than like I mean I tell as many like everyone that I know that I talk to that I race, and like I always like tell them like, you know, just get in the sauna for your hot races, just add it into your training, like it'll help a lot, and like a lot of those guys do it, but like overall not many athletes do it.
Interesting. Do you think they should?
Yeah, certainly. It's but the problem is it's just uncomfortable. Like it's not a nice like experience really. It's hard to do.
Neither is an Ironman race.
Yeah,
That's not why you do it.
but let's just say like if you have no choice in the matter that like the race is happening no matter what, you might as well make the race as easy as possible. And part of that is being prepared to handle heat in the sauna.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I totally agree with you. If you can make your training a little bit harder than your racing, then you've already ticked a lot of boxes. You talked about your training overall. How many hours do you train per week? If we don't count, not counting the, what do you say, 3 sauna sessions, so about 90 minutes of sauna, couple weight training sessions, the respiratory training, which we'll touch on later. So if we just look at swim, bike, run, how many hours are you able to accumulate each week?
so throughout the winter, I was averaging about 22 hours between those three sports.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the main thing though is just because like all the biking is on the trainer. It is so hard to get hours in on the trainer. Um, throughout the summer, usually that picks up because you know when you're biking outside, you can just ride forever. Um, I mean, some of my hours like were limited by school and stuff too, but now once I recover from this race and start building again, those hours should increase a lot. But like within those 22 hours, that's a lot of hard running with track workouts and brick workouts.
When you say brick
Like
runs, for people that don't know the triathlon or running terminology, can you describe what that means?
it's just like running immediately after a bike. So um, trying to like simulate a race basically. So you can do that lots of different ways. You
Mm-hmm.
can just do your ride and then immediately after the ride, just get on your running shoes and go. Or you can do like micro bricks, which is what I was doing a lot of. Like I did about 3 micro brick workouts where I was just doing like 20 kilometers tempo on the bike, 5K tempo, back on the bike, 20K, run 5K, just like 3 times over.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a lot of those little workouts. So it's just like getting your legs used to running off the bike because like everyone who's done a triathlon knows it's different.
It's different. I like the way you put it.
Yeah.
You talked about zone 2 training and its importance. Can you? I think we've heard it from many people, and every athlete at a high level um, talks about how much of that they do, even sometimes lower than zone 2. So why should people care about the low intensity training, and maybe especially talk to the idea that, so a lot of people still think that if you don't have a lot of time, you should just do a lot of intensity, and that's going to make up for the lost time in training. What's your take on that? And then you can expand on the importance of low intensity training.
Okay. So I have to have like this. I've had to like argue with so many people about low intensity training, but because the problem is like it's usually people who are just like I would say genetically gifted. So like there's athletes out there obviously who just don't seem to get injured and can just go hard, like or do a lot more hard work than others. Um, those tend to be the people that like think like zone two stuff is like kind of dumb. Um, because those people certainly do exist where they can just like they can just go hard every day, they not get injured and stuff. But I think for most people, the zone two training is going to be the more beneficial training. Even though at first, when you're zone, because the problem is at first when your zone two is not developed. I mean, I was basically I was doing like a smoker shuffle when I started doing zone two running, bro. I was running I on a good day, I was running like 630 kilometers, but if I was like a little bit stressed out from school or something, those quickly became 730s. So that's
Was that off the
that's
bat
painful.
6 years ago, or did it start later on that you
No,
started to slow down your zone two runs?
that would have been back in 2019 because like before that point, I was like doing a lot of tempo work and a lot of threshold and all that stuff. So those zones were well developed. But the thing is I burn out quick because I didn't have the foundation of fitness to like support them. So even though I could get a lot of really high output, like run 3 minute Ks, bike 350 watts for 5 minutes, stuff like that, like really lightweight, we couldn't sustain it at all. I was like, my matches had burned out so quick. So even
Mhm.
though I could achieve those intensities, couldn't sustain them at all. So then 2019, when I joined the Balance Point team coached by Luke, that's what he focuses on. So it was really a slog at first. And that's how it is for most people. Like, you're barely spinning your legs on the bike, you're doing 120 watts, stuff like that. I literally started at 140 watts and it would be a negative trend the whole time. 2 hours in, my heart rate would be increasing. So I'd have to like bring it down to 120 watts, 110 watts, stuff like that. But once you get through that first like 6 months to a year or whatever to like finally like get that system to adapt and like start improving, like over time, that structure it gets a lot better. But what that does is not only is it improving like your aerobic base, like like literally like the foundation of your fitness, like the chassis in your car, if that makes sense.
100%.
Your you it makes you a super athlete. But it's improving, your muscles get used to the volume. If you're just doing threshold all day, you'll see a lot of those people that try and go too hard and ignoring like the zone two stuff, they get a lot of injuries. um what the zone two training is doing is it's making your body more resilient. Your tendons over time are getting more used to the impact, the longer training sessions, things like that. It makes your body uh more capable to handle the high intensity work, the hard work when you do take it on. But it's providing you a more long-term fitness as well. Like, I mean, anyone does training knows like you can get really functionally fit for a short period of time. You do your month of like hard intervals coming into race day, you hit race day. I mean, you get some PBs, maybe you have like a really good race or whatever, or maybe you're just doing it for like a FTP workout. But then you'll find like shortly after, unless you stay on the hard intervals, that you lose that those numbers. Like they don't sustain themselves. Whereas the aerobic foundation, once you build it up, it does a much better job of like sticking around because it's just it basically never goes away once you build it up.
Mhm.
So then now that you have this big strong foundation, you can achieve much better numbers when you do take on the threshold work. And that fitness will stay around a little bit longer as well. So
How did you get through those first 6 months of painfully slow cycling and running?
uh I just did it, like, because I mean the problem with being like a young athlete too, because I was 19, is like kind of thinking like, oh, this is dumb. Like I'm not even training right now. I'm losing my fitness, because in the summer I was just like going around winning my age group at races, thinking I was sick and all this stuff. And now I'm like, oh, now I'm running 630 Ks. Like, What's this gonna do? Um, but I just like stuck with it, 'cause like I trusted him. I mean, my mindset at that time was like he was a professional Ironman athlete. I know we did some really intense testing. Like we're doing all the, we're using the VO2 master, measuring like all the, exhaled CO2, how much oxygen I'm absorbing, the moxie, all those things. So I was like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. So I'll just trust him and like put my head down and run the 630 Ks and the 7 Ks and whatever. And like I'd be getting roasted on my Strava too, because I used to run cross country. So I went from running with these guys, you basically don't run anything slower than a 4-minute kilometer, to running 7-minute Ks. And, but I just did it, and my numbers like improved over time. And I mean, now my zone 2 is like my tempo numbers from back then. Like it's vastly improved. Like it's a lot better now.
Able to talk some numbers on the progression from those 637s. Where are you now? And then on the bike as well, you talked about 140 watts. What do your zone 2s look like that nowadays?
So nowadays, so back in the day, just say 2019, I could probably average about 140 watts for a 2-hour ride when I first started, in my zone 2, like right at the very top of it.
Mhm.
Now I can do, on a really good day, I can do like between 220 and 230
Mhm.
in like mid zone 2. So not even like trying to push limits, just like keeping it like more essential. But like on a day where I'm more tired, that number is going to be more like 210, 215. So obviously like that's a pretty large improvement.
Yeah.
um Running, so back then, like on a perfect flat, I could run like somewhat low six. Like I could get down to like 615s on a good day, whereas now like on a flat it would be, I've had days where I've been running like low four, like 415 in my zone 2, but that's kind of right at the top. Like I tend to stay more in the middle. I don't sustain that top end zone 2 as well. That starts to fall off a little bit, but
Mhm.
I can pretty comfortably do like 430 in zone 2 running
So
now.
that's
So
a
it's like
that's a
2 minutes.
2 minute difference in 3 years. So
Yeah.
and it sounds small to some, big to others, but it's given that now the intensity is sustainable for you in that you can do that without accumulating much nervous and metabolic fatigue, and you can do
Yeah.
more of it, and then as a result of this support more of the high intensity work. Would you say it was all worth it?
Yeah, certainly. Because like a big part of it is that my hours were able to increase so much. So like when I go for a run, back then, just say I run 5-minute Ks for 45 minutes, which is like something I would pretty commonly do. I just said, whatever, 5-minute Ks, that's easy, right? Like I thought so. But realistically, what's going on inside of my body is I actually was like, probably tapping into my tempo zone. I probably burning a little bit more sugar than I needed to be burning, not really using like the that zone 2 fitness, not burning fat, and then that'll take away from the evening bike that I'm trying to do, or the next workout of the day, whatever it is. Whereas now it's like I can go do an hour and a half of running, zone 2, and then do a bike ride a couple hours later just as good as if I didn't do the hour and a half run beforehand, just by keeping that run in zone 2. And it just makes your body so much more resilient. Like, I mean, last summer we were doing days that were like literally 8 hours long of training, and then still waking up the next morning and getting back at it with more workouts. Like it makes you so much more resilient and just capable of like taking on just training hours, really.
So you mentioned you could tolerate so much more volume, still feel fresh, get better training, and now all those paces have dramatically improved. But you still said before that on a bad day or on a day where you weren't feeling great, you're going to adjust that power. Is that something that you've always done? Listen to your body, listen to yourself and how you're feeling? Or is that something you've kind of developed and learned over the years?
I'm trying to think. It was a little bit different before. I would say I was maybe less sensitive, but also maybe less aware to stuff like that before I really started taking on the zone 2 training. Certainly, like, I think now part of it is I'm wearing my Garmin full time, so I know I'm getting the health metrics. I find the body battery stuff like pretty useful, because I think it incorporates like calories and sleep and like HRV and all those things. So I am always like looking at that. And of course, like I'm doing my HRV.
How much does that
But it's
inform
like
your training for the day, the HRV?
it's more of like I look at it as so if I wake up and I'm not feeling good, I would check it out to see if I just hadn't recovered from the day before. And that was especially useful during school, because like even though maybe the day before wasn't necessarily hard training wise, maybe the stress of the school might have had a larger effect than I was aware of at the time. Because I know like sometimes I'll be sitting at my desk trying to get through a lab report and like having trouble, and my heart rate will be 95, 100 for 2 or 3 hours straight, but I won't know because I'm just sitting there trying, like, all sweaty, trying to get this thing done, not realizing that I'm actually kind of doing a workout. Like because I'll look at it on my watch after. Sometimes I look at the stress levels and the heart rate, and all of a sudden I have this long period of time where I'm just sitting at 100 beats per minute. That's like, oh well, yeah, that's obviously going to affect training the next day. But I find that like the metrics on the Garmin, if you wear it all the time, like it factors that stuff in to the body battery. So I find it to be fairly useful. So like on a day where I wake up at a score of 95, usually that matches up to me feeling fairly good. And other days I wake up at a 65. Usually that lines up pretty well with how I'm feeling, but I always make sure to just like pay attention to myself first. A lot of times I won't even look at it. Like I'll do the morning swim first, because the swimming will expose everything. If you're even just a little bit off that day, it will show up in the pool. There's no doubt about it. Like the pool is the most that's the realest part of training, I would say. Your fitness, how well you've recovered, everything you've done wrong will show up in the pool. It's just the way it is. So
What do you think that is? Is it because there's such a sensation component to the swimming that you need to be, kind of and I'm talking from just what I've watched on Lionel Sanders's videos, so I don't know how to swim. So correct me if I'm saying anything stupid. But it's like you got to feel the water. You got to be, your body's got to be in a good alignment. You got to be able to manage that element around you, or it's managing you. So why do you think that the pool is so revealing when you're tired?
Part of it is your muscles have to be well, I'd say your muscles have to be and joints have to be like mobile, because the technique is so dependent on your shoulder mobility and things like that. So and like your body positioning. So part of it is, if your muscles are like still really fatigued or tired from training, you're gonna it's really gonna start to affect your technique and slow you down that way. But I also think swimming, especially if you're doing like anything a little bit hard in the pool, it's such a high metabolic demand, because you're using everything and you're restricting air.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I think all those factors, and the other thing is like mentally too, you have to be focused on what you're doing, like really focused to be swimming well. Um, and it's early in the morning, so there's like a lot of compounding factors that affect your swimming, and like if anything is off a little bit, it can become a big problem in the pool. So that's a big part of why recovery is so important, why like I value recovery so much, and well, why everyone should, if you want to be a good athlete, because like the better you recover, the better you're going to show up to all your workouts. But yeah, especially swimming, like if you don't show up to your morning swim having done the best job you could have done recovering the evening or the night before, it's going to show up in the pool.
So you joined Balance Point Racing 3 years ago now, 2019, you said?
3 years. 2019 fall. Yep.
Fall 2019. So you talked about Luke and the testing that you did with him at the onset. So first of all, maybe how did you get to know Luke? And then was there anything that surprised you when you started working with the team?
So I got to know Luke because so I actually came to Kelowna with two other friends from Manitoba. One of the guys, he was already here. He was training with Luke. He convinced, so I was at the University of Manitoba for my first year of university, whereas he was here. He convinced me to switch to UBC, Okanagan. So I came. I already had my coach, and then I was more interested also in joining cross country. So I wanted to do cross country running, things like that. So I did that for a year. And then summer after, then my other friend came from Manitoba. All these guys, all triathletes, and he joined Luke's team as well. So I was kind of like the odd one out, but I still had my other coach. And then I did that summer of training and racing here in Okanagan, still with my old coach. But then like I just jumped in a few sessions with them, a couple of rides and runs and stuff, and like I really liked what they were doing. I liked having like a team around me, because I was basically I trained entirely alone basically for my entire career up until that point. Like I know when I was my first year in university, I just biked in my dorm room, walked to the pool, swam alone in the morning, like running on the treadmill alone, just never training with people really. And then there was kind of the same thing here, but also just like that team had some really fast guys on it, as well as some other like people, another guy doing Ironman who was really good. I just like, it was pretty organic, just did a couple workouts with them, liked it, and then just eventually ended up joining.
What were the main differences between Luke's approach and what you were doing with the team compared to what you were doing before?
So before, I would say I was doing a fairly decent amount of training time. I would say, like, I was probably averaging between maybe 17 to 20 hours a week.
Mm.
So I would say it was still like a decent amount of training because I was getting good, or fairly good that way. But the problem was is that like I would constantly be having like setbacks. Like I got a labral tear in my hip, which was that took 3 years to like get that to go away.
Mm.
Um, little things like, well, that's, I guess that's a big thing, but just little things like stuff would start to hurt, and then, oh, I can't run today, foot's hurting, and then just I was like really inconsistent, so I could build up, I could get really good, you know, have a really good week, and then just not, and then all of a sudden I would just like lose that fitness. I wouldn't be able to replicate it. So I was like really like up and down, just not consistent, things like that. But I was doing a lot of like tempo and threshold work. So, but then like I kind of like maxed out. I got to a point where I just wasn't getting better as well. Um, so when I, yeah, so then when I switched to Luke, what surprised me is I started basically doing almost no threshold. I was doing my first couple months with Luke, it'd be like one hard track workout per week. That would be the threshold run. But then most of that would be actually doing like workouts. So in between the 800-meter intervals, we're doing stair sprints and squats and lunges and stuff like that. I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, I thought we were running, but no, like he knows what he's doing. Like you have to strengthen these joints and these muscles and things like that. You have to, when you're doing stair sprints, that's almost like running with perfect form. It's got good knee drive and hip extension because we're doing like double or triple stairs, right? So fully extended knee drive, hip extension.
It's like
But
strides,
so I
strides without the eccentric portion, essentially.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't understand that at the time. Looking back on it now, I'm like, oh, thank God I was doing that stuff because I wouldn't be the athlete I am now if I didn't.
Mm.
But yeah, so that sort of thing, just like really unorthodox because I experienced a lot of different triathlon programs. I was in like the Manitoba Triathlon Center for a while when I was racing junior elite. I mean, in that program, I was basically just a swimmer. You just swim 10 hours a week, and then you do like two 45-minute bikes as hard as you absolutely can. And like a hard 5K run, and you're good to go. You can go race junior elite. That's about all it takes. So I've been in a lot of different programs, but Luke's, yeah, just really what seemed to be unorthodox to me. A lot of emphasis on strength and structural work. That's that zone 2. I just like biking around, really easy. I was just used to going out there and being like, okay, how long can I hold 270 watts today? Let's do it. And then all of a sudden I get in a group ride with Luke and we're going up a hill at 6 kilometers an hour. And I'm like, bro, let's go. Come on. But no, you have to stay locked in at your heart rate. Running, yeah, just but like I went from like running hard like multiple times a week to just once a week. Same thing biking. Like before, it was like any day that I felt good, I just get on the bike and spin the pedals as hard as I could, and I just no more of that. It was just like zone 2 riding. So it is pretty much opposite of what I was used to.
And yet now you race faster.
Yes. But a lot of that is attributed to because I did the structural work. Now I can do much more hard training.
Right. It's good that you bring that up. I always, when I try to explain why people should do more low intensity, and it's especially important for an endurance sport and a long one like Ironman. But
Yeah.
I mean, so far I've worked with powerlifters, with CrossFit athletes, with fighters, MMA fighters, and I try to tell them that structural, that zone 2 work, that's not what's going to necessarily impact your sports performance directly, but it's kind of the foundation to your sports training. And then that sports training is going to have an impact on your performance. So if you can do more of your training, more of your hard training, and recover from it better, you're likely to get better at your sport if you do it properly. And so it's kind of 2 steps removed. It's not a direct link. It's an indirect link, but a very important one.
Exactly.
So talk to me about respiratory training. We touched on that with Luke and Andrew this morning on the podcast. So that would be, I believe it's about 3 or 4 episodes back from this one. For those who are interested, was it something that you had seen before, that you had done before? And what did you think about it the first time around?
So the respiratory training, I had never seen it before I started, I'd never seen it before I became aware of Luke's team. So when my friends joined, I was watching them breathe into this bag essentially, because we'd always be hanging out all the time. They'd be like, "Oh shoot, gotta do our breathe away workout real quick," and then like they'd just be sitting on the couch, breathing in this bag, and I'm like, "What are you guys doing? How is that helping?" But so joining the team, Luke hooked me up with his breatheway. So how we use it, or how we were using it in the Ironman build up for me. So in the pool, pretty common workout would be 100-meter intervals on 2 minutes. So you think, oh, well, that's a lot of rest. Well, the whole point was, so you do the 100 meters. So, Brock would come in on like a 107, and I'd be coming in on like maybe like a 112, get immediately up on the wall, grab, and then like just breathe into the bag, into the breatheway. And what that's doing is like, it's spiking your CO2 levels even more, because these are basically like max 100-meter intervals. You're going as hard as you can. So basically already choking and suffocating by the time you get to the wall. And then you go and you spike that CO2 even further directly, breathing into the bag. So you're rebreathing the CO2. That gets a workout that hard takes a lot of time to like build up to. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do that when I first started, because like even doing it recently, like my vision's going black almost on doing that. Like becomes a pretty dark tunnel. But what that's doing is like you're exposing yourself to very, very limited low oxygen conditions for a short period of time, and that's a huge shock on the system. So your body has no choice but to adapt by improving its methods of like oxygen absorption and transport. It has no choice, because now it's freaking out. You're being exposed to these high CO2 environments. So yeah, just doing that repeatedly between intervals. That's for like CO2 tolerance, and like that's more like a functional thing, like maybe oxygen delivery, things like that. A more structural breathing workout would just be like he puts them in my training peaks as 30 minutes, but I usually can't really do 30 minutes very well. I do like 15-20 minutes of like just it's like kind of like a step test of breathing. So I'm making sure I'm doing the full 6-liter bag, so 6-liter breaths. And you start like 30 breaths a minute for like a minute or two, bring it up to 37, and then you just work your way up all the way up to as high as you can get. So
when you started doing, sorry to cut you off, when you started doing those, could you breathe the 6-liter bag for 30 breaths per minute?
No,
Where
not,
do you have an
not
idea of where
even.
you started, roughly?
I started with a 3 liter bag. That's that's what I had to start with. I mean, my I could breathe the 6 liter bag, like, or I could breathe about, I think my lung volume at that point was like 5.5 liters or so when I did my max exhalation test, because he has like I forget what the little device is called, but you breathe
Spirometer.
through it and then yeah, and it's measuring your max like 1 second output and then your max
Six
like
second.
whatever five,
Yeah.
yeah, 6 second. um and so like I think my max is like 5.5 liters total, so I couldn't quite do the 6 liter bag. But over time, that was the first thing to come, was like the lung capacity. So I worked up to like 6 liters fairly quick, but it was more about developing like the muscles, like the diaphragm and intercostals and stuff, to really like squeeze out 6 liters and then suck it back in at 45, 50 breaths per minute. That's a much harder task. I actually like I got quite my breathing numbers got quite good up until before when I got COVID. It affected those quite a lot.
Mhm.
I actually went I went into this Ironman with some of the worst like breathing numbers that I've had in a while because of that. But before that point, like I improved quite drastically. Like I mean, it was like I think I was peaking at like I could do like 45, 50 breaths per minute in a 6 liter bag,
How long?
and sustain it fairly well. So I can't remember what that equates to, because we measure like the CO2 exhalation and oxygen absorption
Mhm.
or what is it, liters per minute.
Okay.
So basically just like liters per minute. We measured that, and like that got up to quite like a pretty reasonable value for myself. Um, Brock has like scary numbers when it comes to that, because he's very well trained. He's been in the program for like his whole life basically. He knows, he's been working breathing since he was very young. Uh, but yeah, that's one of the big things. And then so in my training, oh yeah, we do it at the track as well.
Mm.
Between intervals at the tracks, similar to the swim workout, keep the CO2 high, and
Mhm.
then just immediately get back into the run. But what that's done is like improving the CO2 tolerance gives you much better like functional capability when it comes to training and racing. So I
What does it
be
change?
despite being
If you were to describe for someone who maybe doesn't even know what the function of CO2 in the body is, how do you describe the sensation of what it does for you in a competition setting or in a training setting? What's the difference between before and after with CO2 tolerance training?
so when you're going hard and it starts to feel like you can't get enough air anymore, your breathing is no longer supporting the effort. That means you never truly go fully anaerobic, but now you're tapping into that part, into those zones where you're no longer supporting the output with the right amount of oxygen. So that's when chest starts to tighten. Maybe your vision is getting blurry if you're going hard enough. You can certainly do, like I've certainly gotten to that point where like I've gotten tunnel vision from a workout. You can do it. Um, but it's like just going really hard and you feel like you're kind of like suffocating a little bit. That's when your CO2 is like maxed out. So what that means is when you train that, not now you're more used to it.
Mhm.
So like getting to that point isn't as scary. You become a little bit more confident in that range, but it also means now that it takes much longer to get there. So it raises that ceiling of fitness or of functionality just a little bit more.
Mhm.
So you can go much harder before achieving that, and then when you achieve that that level of effort, it's not such a shock to the system. Your body's like, oh, I've been here before.
Mhm.
So
So if we take those, get those CO2 tolerance sessions, you have the more kind of capacity and respiratory endurance, if we might call them that sessions.
Yeah.
How do you spread those out throughout the week? Do you have a set number of each that you have to do? Does it vary from week to week?
The the longer sessions where it's just like a breathing step test, that sort of thing, those I just fit them in whenever I can. But the actual more like the CO2 tolerance sessions, that'll be like in any of the hard threshold swims, between intervals on the track, like every week, no matter what, for like the last 3 years. It's been like breathe away between track intervals, always, no matter what. Like immediately after finishing that interval, get on the bag. Pretty often during bike rides, sometimes, not always, for CO2 tolerance on the bike. For me, a lot of it is learning how to breathe better in aero position, because like for me, the position I ride is somewhat aggressive. So like when I get down into it, it's like my lung volume, it suffers a lot unless I'm like, or at first it would basically be cut in half when I was riding in that position. Whereas when you get down there and you actually focus on like doing full breaths into the bag and strengthening the muscles, because it's like it's different when you're just like sitting relaxed breathing. There's nothing inhibiting your breathing at all. But when you're tense on a bike holding that position, your back muscles are engaged, your core is engaged, and all these things, you're breathing in a much more like restricted environment. Like your diaphragm and all these things aren't able to like expand as well. So a lot of my breathing that I've been doing on the bike has been practicing proper like 6-liter breaths in aero position. A lot of times it's also just recovery on the bike. So it actually, I can't remember what the mechanism was, but it does improve recovery a fair bit. Like after an interval, not like giving a little bit of time for the CO2 to diminish, and then getting on the bag and then just like relaxing, doing like 30 deep breaths a minute, that sort of thing, for like a minute or two. And then it helps recovery sometimes between intervals. So we'll do that. So it's sprinkled into a lot of my workouts throughout the week, like lots of breathing training throughout the week. And then just a handful of like the proper structural sessions.
Mm-hmm. What effect would you say the respiratory training has had on your overall performance over the last 2 years?
It's not super obvious, but it shows up in the testing data for sure. You can see it in the numbers. When my my breathing supports much, it allows me to support much higher efforts for longer now. So when we do the BPAs, we can see that I'm achieving better numbers, but also I'm doing a lot more liters per minute of air that is also like coinciding with these improved numbers. You'll see like the blood oxygenation isn't dropping off so steeply anymore. Like before, as soon as I hit the limit of my zone 2, it was just like straight downhill. It was like I became a ticking time bomb of like I'm gonna crack pretty soon after leaving that zone. And that zone was not very good to begin with. It didn't last very long. So yeah, that's kind of where it shows up. But like in training, a big part of it, and racing, is like if I focus on just like my tempo running, just say when I'm running an Ironman, it's always 4 steps per breath in, 4 steps per breath out, that sort of thing. So focusing on like actually getting a full 6 liters in over 4 steps and a full 6 liters out over 4 steps. that keeps like all the, the blood oxygenation, like even the CO2, even those things are not spiking. It keeps your effort governed. So like I do that, and then obviously I check my power while I'm running, while I'm doing that, and like my heart rate and stuff. And then so between those three metrics, I keep everything locked in perfectly. So that's perfect pacing. There's no spiking the effort on the hills, nothing like that. And so it really helps with pacing. Biking too. One of the main things biking is for whatever. Well, actually, it makes sense why. Like after a couple hours into a ride, I can feel my lungs get tired from like trying to breathe in that tight aero position. So just like remembering the training and focusing on the training to like fight that feeling and maintain those like 6 liter breaths, it just really helps bike performance a lot. Because I always like I retrospectively like look at all my old data, and I can see my rides, it's a pretty steep negative trend the whole time. Well, not steep, but it's a negative trend the whole time in power, and it's steeper than I would have liked at the time. Whereas now that I'm controlling that, because I know a lot of that is just attributed to like literally not breathing well. Like my lungs are getting tired in aero position, so I just get lazy and like let it go a little bit. Well, now I'm not getting in enough air. It's like, well, I can't support the power, and the power comes down, and the heart rate comes up because I'm just not getting enough oxygen, and I'm getting mad about not doing the power I want. Things like that. Whereas now, I fight that, maintain that breathing, and maintain the lung volume, and staying like disciplined, and it just the power is much more sustained now. The heart rate more level, more even, that sort of thing. Less cardiac drift throughout a workout, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Let's we have a few minutes left, Jameson. Let's talk a little bit about your race a couple weeks ago in St. George.
Yep.
So how was your prep leading up, just as a general overview? Did it feel good? And then how do you think you executed the race relative to what you were aiming for?
I would say my prep was as good as I could have done, given the early season conditions, just being locked into like riding a trainer all the time. Just like getting COVID. But the thing is, like I knew immediately, like I took the initiative to make the recovery from that as perfect as possible. Really like monitoring HRV, monitoring sleep, just all these things, not getting overly ambitious with training. So all that stuff, kept good, consistent weeks. Had a very good, my coach, he always does an Ironman specific workout a month out from the race, where it's 180 kilometers on the bike. The first half is like your goal power, and then the second 90K is like 15-minute intervals at threshold. So I did that, and then I made the hardest route I could make around the Okanagan, like literally the most like but it's actually one of the hardest 180Ks I've probably ever done. So I made sure to like simulate that St. George course, because the St. George course, man, that's the hardest Ironman course I would say that there is. Like overall, it's like nearly 3,000 meters elevation gain between the bike and the run. Like that's no joke. So I made sure to like kind of simulate that with a really hard bike with like lots of elevation, got like 2,400 meters or something. And then immediately like pulling my bike into the garage, get the shorts on and a shirt and shoes, and then it's right into 16 times a mile on 2 minutes rest. So I had my chair ready outside with all my bottles and gels and stuff underneath, and then just doing miles around my block right on race pace. So I think I was running like 350 kilometers or something for that. So it was like a really good day. And then yeah, coming in like potentially I might have overtrained a little because I did have to take a little rest period, like couple days of rest in there because like my numbers started going down. I just wasn't recovering. But like that's stuff that you need because it's only my second Ironman, so that's more of like an experience problem. I have to um, do more of these training preps to like learn to like how to perfectly manage like volume and stuff like that. But I think overall, like I would give myself a score of like probably 85%. If I had to grade it, I'd say that prep was like an 85%.
How about the race?
And then race day, yeah. I showed up in the morning. One of the first, like for me, I'm really sensitive to like losing sleep. So generally, like when I show up these Ironmans early in the morning, I'm always like a little bit headachy and stuff and just not feeling good. But this one, like I showed up in the morning and I really like made sure like get into bed at like 8:30 p.m. and like had a good sleep, all that stuff. Showed up in the morning, feeling motivated, none of the usual like early morning like fatigue problems, none of that stuff. Just like ready to go. Um, and it was good. It was relaxed. Like all the guys, like I know all these guys that I race, like I talk to them at races and stuff. Good guys, just lots of banter and stuff because they kind of corral us down like the big chute, so we're all walking together. Right, everyone's like kind of just being funny and flexing and whatever, and like making jokes. It's a good time these races really. They started us with the 25 to 29s, which was another good thing. There's lots of really fast guys in that age group. Um, Started to swim. Swim is good. Pretty typical like age group mosh pit of just going through people. They're like age group swims. Like I'd probably swim 5 minutes faster if I didn't have to swim through like 500 people. Because it's hard. It's like it's literally a mosh pit of just arms and fists and legs and just crazy. Getting around a buoy is an absolute job in an Ironman. So the swim actually went very well. I had a good swim relative to like how I normally swim in Ironman races. Got on the bike but that's kind of like where I started having a little bit of problems is for whatever reason I was fighting with hydration all day. I kind of just started off dehydrated. I thought I did well in the morning. I was getting lots of water back, got my electrolyte mix back, had some bananas, like my usual like race morning. So it's always worked before. So I wasn't sure exactly what happened. It's not clear to me, but I started the bike and I cracked pretty hard halfway through the bike. And the other thing is usually I pee like multiple times through an Ironman bike. That's pretty usual. And like training for me, long rides and stuff, like multiple pees. That means like I know that I'm hydrated and that like I've made sure that my fluid intake is appropriate because I always like more is better when it comes to fluid. And I make sure not to do too much salt either because I dehydrate very quick if I don't limit my salt. It's kind of weird. I guess that's the opposite problem for a lot of people at hot races. But like for me, I can't do more than like 400 or 500 milligrams an hour, or else I dehydrate. So yeah, I made sure to stay within my limits. But even then, I didn't pee once throughout the bike, so that means I was retaining all that water. So somehow that means that potentially my salt intake was a little bit too high, and I was just dehydrated, so I was losing a lot of power throughout the bike. But again, these are experienced things. This like it's so hard to like to really like do an Ironman well until you've done a lot of them. So, and this is only my second one, and all my training is in much different conditions. I don't do any desert riding. So even though I've done lots of long rides, so I have my nutrition and hydration really locked in for these like Canadian conditions. I don't have a ton of experience for the desert conditions. So I just need a little bit more of that to improve that part. But Yeah, so my biking, my power was, falling off a fair bit. Overall, though, I'd say the bike was still mostly respectable given the conditions. For because it wasn't like overly hot, but it was very dry, and the
Mm.
crosswinds were very strong, like very strong crosswinds. So the big long climbs started like the descent started at 140K, and then you hit another big long climb and then descend all the way into the finish. So the two big long extended descent sections were into very strong crosswinds at the very end of the bike ride. So that like for me, I was relatively used to handling that stuff. Like crosswinds and those things don't bother me a ton, just like coming from Manitoba and really like spending a lot of time fighting those. But they still like affect my bike a little bit. But for a lot of people, they found that really hard, like destroyed their core.
Mm.
Just the right side of your body just being so tense and like fatigued from like trying to hold on to aero bars in those conditions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like came in, and in transition, I had like a emergency bottle in my T2 bag. So in the Ironmans, that you have your transition equipment in little bags
Yeah.
and they hang. Then so you run through the tent, pick up your bag. You just sit down on a bench. You throw if it's T1, you throw your swim gear into the bike bag after you take your bike stuff out. If it's T2, you throw your bike stuff into your run bag. You take your run stuff out. So you sit down, get my shoes on, race belt on, and then I had my Morton bottle in there, and so I just started chugging that thing. Uh, that that seemed to work fairly well. I was just chugging that between T2, and then got to mile 1 aid station. Immediately right there, threw back a big bottle of water, and then that finally after that brought back like the sensation that I finally had to take a pee. So I kind of knew at that point I'd kind of caught up on my hydration, and it showed up because I was really cracking pretty hard on the bike. But finally, after that first aid station, my heart rate and things were starting to settle down,
Where
and
were you
my
placed
perform.
at T2?
Oh, T2. I think I had gotten past, or maybe I think the guy might have been ahead of me the whole time for the bike. So I believe I was in like second. Um, but yeah, so I got that recovered, that system. Things started to relax a bit. I really, put my head down, started doing the work. Caught the first place guy, kind of at the top of the hill. The hill was like 5 kilometers long to start the run, which was not like that's not a nice run course, man. That's not what you want to do in an Ironman.
Up and
Uh,
down and over again.
Yeah, because the run course was just basically up and down the same hill. So you go up to the top, down a little bit, back up, and then down, and then you just do that same loop again. Um, yeah, really hard. Caught him, and basically like ran very well for the first half of the run. Everything was going pretty smoothly. I could kind of tell that I was starting to feel pretty rough, but like nothing was really shutting down yet. Um, It wasn't until the second lap, kind of like 26-ish kilometers into the run, that's like basically once I got to the top of the second hill again, things started to fall apart for me. That's when I got caught by the second place guy, a different guy this time. He caught up to me. So I just like decided to run with him. Basically, I just ran behind him. That's a tactic. I probably shouldn't be like sharing this knowledge with everyone, but if you're in a race and you're in a game of cat and mouse, make sure you're the second guy. Don't run ahead. You run behind. Like especially if you're not confident that you can beat the guy,
Mm.
always go behind so that he can't tell how much you're suffering or if anything is going wrong for you. So that because that's kind of what was going on. I was and that way you can watch them too. So I was watching his legs and like kind of listening to his breathing. Um, and at that point too, my calves and stuff are really starting to cramp. That's something new that I've never experienced before. I almost never get like calf cramps ever. and my back was cramping. That's another thing that never happens to me. I don't know why I was getting these little problems. It's stuff I have to look into. And like, yeah, obviously the quads, the usual, those always like cramp kind of at the end of an Ironman. That's pretty normal. But yeah, a lot of things just going wrong. We're barely like, we're running up the hills and like, surging on each other a little bit, playing like a little game of cat and mouse. It was fun. I like racing like that, like having like people around me to like really that you don't know. It's like actually like nerve-wracking to like be in a proper race situation like that. But the little things to look for when you're racing someone, just if they start checking their watch a lot, that's when you know it's kind of over for them. And that's caught him doing that a fair bit. He was checking his watch more than I was, so that means he was hurting more than I was. That's literally, I promise that is 100% correlation. Is how bad you're hurting is directly correlated to how much you're checking your watch. So that's something to look for. If you're racing someone, that's check for that. But my legs were really not much better. It wasn't until like the last kilometer we got into, it was like a slight uphill gradient into the finish line. So I just started. I figured like if I'm going to win this race, like I have to make this decision. I have to like just do it now. So that's what I did. Just started like picking up the pace, made it kind of like a build kilometer. And then he was holding on, kind of running beside me for most of it. So I was like, well, I guess I got to just sprint then. So I just let her rip. I don't know, maybe like the last 400 meters or so. I can't really tell, but it was enough to like win the race anyways. So yeah, but my legs were done at the finish line, basically right into the medical tent. Like I was in bad shape. It's just hydration
Mm.
that I really have to figure out hydration. That's a very complicated task in an Ironman is
Mhm.
hydration. That's honestly probably the hardest part of it. So
Yeah, it's so fascinating because there's all the training, but then on top of that, you can do all the right stuff in your training year round. If you're not on point with nutrition and hydration on the day, that's pretty much it. You cannot get through
yep,
it at your highest potential if those things are not dialed in.
exactly. And if you watch the pros on their YouTube and stuff, like Lionel's been through it all, those guys like they're very honest about it that that's their worst days is when the nutrition is not on point. So like these are super athletes that on when they mess up their nutrition, they're racing like age groupers. So it's you quickly can, no matter how good of an athlete you are, you can quickly lose all of that the moment that your hydration or your nutrition falls off. So it's such an important aspect of racing.
Mm-hmm. Jameson, what do you look forward to in the coming years? What are some goals that you have for yourself down the road?
Um, my primary goal is to make the like to make professional racing, like as a professional triathlon racing, like as a realistic lifestyle for myself. Because I mean, getting to that caliber is one thing, which I know I can do that. I can achieve the professional caliber. It's just making it like a sustainable lifestyle because it's very hard to make that sustainable. So one of my main goals is to like make that a reality. But also, I mean, I'll be writing like exams for professional schools as well, like the MCAT and things like that, because I better not just throw my degree away. I better stay on that path, just like as a plan B. Um, yeah, that's really my two goals in the foreseeable future is just continue on with my studies and to try and take this sport to the next level. Probably any professional racing won't happen for me until next year. If it does, potentially if the Kona World Championships goes super well, I might take on Cozumel in November as a pro, but we'll see. Haven't committed to anything yet.
Well, my friend, it was a great pleasure having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and being so open and honest about everything that you do, everything you have done, right, wrong. I think it's very
Yeah, thank you.
inspiring, honestly, for me to see. I dare to say it, a youngster like you come on the podcast and share so much great information. And like I said, being very transparent and honest and not holding anything back. So, my hat is off to you. And I hope that you do really well in the next few months and years. I hope you achieve both those goals, because I think they're well within reach, and you're well on your way to get there. And again, I hope you inspire some people to maybe, get working a couple tweaks into their training, and try to train smart and then do the right thing for them, and hopefully reap the benefits. So thanks so much, man. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. All the best, man. See you at the next race.
You.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.